In the name of God, hello and welcome. I'm Ali Reza Maradi with the latest coming to you live from Tehran. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani says the country's handling of the deadly coronavirus pandemic has been acceptable and comparable to that of the developed countries. Addressing a cabinet meeting on Sunday, President Hassan Rouhani emphasized that the Iranian people are witnessing that even rich countries in financial, economic, medical and scientific terms have faced severe problems during the COVID-19 pandemic. President Rouhani said all countries across the world face numerous complications over the past 100 days in running their domestic affairs, particularly in the economic fields, adding that all Iranian institutions and officials, as well as private and state sectors, made great efforts during the virus outbreak. Iran has been among the countries hit hard by the coronavirus that first showed up in China in late December 2019 before spreading across the globe. Illegal U.S. sanctions have hampered the virus battle in Iran, which reported its first COVID-19 infection case in late February. The number of people infected with the novel coronavirus in Iran has exceeded 151,000, of whom nearly 119,000 have recovered from the disease. Iranian Health Ministry's spokesman Kianush Jahanpour said at a press conference on Sunday that the number of people tested positive for COVID-19 across the country has risen to 151,466 following the detection of 2,516 new cases since the day before. He noted that 118,848 patients have recovered from the coronavirus infection so far and have been discharged from hospitals. According to Jahanpour, the coronavirus death toll in Iran now stands at 7,797 following the death of 63 patients over the past 24 hours. Among those undergoing treatment in hospitals at present, 2,527 patients are in critical conditions because of more severe infections. He also noted that 935,894 coronavirus diagnostic tests have been carried out in Iran so far. More than 6,161,000 people have been infected with COVID-19 globally, and the death toll has exceeded 371,000. Yemen has criticized the United Nations' lack of actions amid the COVID-19 pandemic, saying the international organization's actions do not reach the level of the crisis faced by the health sector in the country.
As the threat of COVID-19 is spreading out, executive directors of public and private hospitals throughout Yemen have attended this urgent meeting following the health ministry's announcement that the situation has become alarming. Yemeni health minister called on private and public hospitals to join hands in the fight.
We call on all private and public hospitals to open isolation sections and treat patients and suspected cases with COVID-19.
The health ministry has also criticized the United Nations' lack of actions amid the pandemic. This is the main isolation center for COVID-19 patients. The staff here say the center suffers from the shortage of testing kits as hospitals around the city are forced to turn people away as they lack all necessary items in the fight against the global pandemic.
We are only supported by the Ministry of Health, and with all possible means we are trying hard to save people's lives as this center receives patients from all over the country.
2 years ago, Yemen faced the worst cholera outbreak. Since last year, Yemen was struck with famine, and now this global pandemic has hit the impoverished country while the world keeps watching without taking any serious action. Experts say as the battle against Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates-led coalition still rages on, now another front has further escalated before Yemenis. They say this time the invisible enemy requires a total lift of Riyadh's blockade and an immediate end to its aggression to enable the world war-torn country defeat the global pandemic and save more lives. Mohammed Attab, Press TV, Sana'a.
Moving on, one person was killed in Detroit, Michigan after someone in a vehicle fired shots into a crowd of demonstrators protesting the death of George Floyd, an African-American who died after a white police officer knelt on his neck while he was handcuffed. My colleague Omid Haydari has this story.
The shooting occurred near Detroit Greektown Entertainment District as officers were confronted with dozens of protesters, said Detroit Police Department spokesman Nicole Kirkwood. Kirkwood said the victim was a 19-year-old man who was pronounced dead at the hospital. The shooting took place after President Donald Trump fueled racial tensions with his provocative comments criticizing the massive protest in Minneapolis. Twitter accused Trump of glorifying violence on Thursday after he tweeted, "When the looting starts, the shooting starts." The White House was placed on lockdown after demonstrators gathered outside a building to protest Floyd's death. The U.S. Secret Service ordered a lockdown Friday evening as over 100 people gathered outside the building's gates, with reports of some burning American flags. The measures were taken while a dozen reporters were still inside the White House. In a separate rally in the U.S. Capitol, over 2,000 protesters moved to the Trump International Hotel, chanting "We can't breathe" and "No justice, no peace," as well as carrying a variety of signs. Others gathered near 14th and U Street in Northwest, briefly blocking an intersection before heading to the White House. Protests over the police killing of George Floyd and other African Americans have spread to cities across the U.S. Several U.S. flags were seen set on fire and burned throughout the night. Others decorated N95 masks with anti-police brutality messages, some saying "We all can't breathe" and other "America is suffocating." Large demonstrations were also held on Friday in cities including New York, Atlanta, Detroit, Denver, and Houston, as well as Minneapolis, Minnesota's largest city, where Floyd was killed by the hands of police. Dozens of buildings were razed to the ground in Minneapolis, Minnesota, during 4 nights of arrests, which had left the city looking like a war zone. Floyd's death has sparked outrage around the world, and his brother, Philonis Floyd, has branded it an execution. U.S. police killings rarely lead to justice for victims. Officers Derek Chauvin, 44, was charged with third-degree murder and second-degree manslaughter. Chauvin had his knees on Floyd's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. He faces up to 25 years in prison if convicted. Despite the arrest, the sporadic nature of criminal charges against officers in such incidents frustrates civil rights activists. Iran, meantime, has criticized Washington's heavy-handed crackdown on protests against police racism and brutality, saying instead of using vicious dogs and ominous weapons, the U.S. government should listen to the people and change its backdrop policies. In a tweet on Sunday, the Iranian Foreign Ministry alluded to the fact that the current problems nagging the United States, including the self-created crisis following the COVID-19 outbreak, stem from failure of the administration of President Donald Trump to keep its promise of stopping wasting money on foreign adventurism. Iran's Foreign Minister Mohammad Jawad Zarif took to Twitter on Saturday in relation to the killing of an unarmed African-American by the U.S. police in Minneapolis, urging the world to wage war against racism. Earlier on Thursday, the Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman said the recent heart-wrenching killing of the American black man by a white policeman that has gone viral testifies to methodical racism and white supremacy in the United States. The massive protests sweeping across America are not only sending shockwaves through the U.S. political establishment, but they have now crossed the Atlantic and threatened similar social and political movements in the UK.
And now Austrian activists have staged an anti-Israeli protest over Israel's decision to annex the Jordan Valley for its illegal settlements in the West Bank.
This is the first day since the coronavirus lockdown in Austria that people can organize events and gatherings with the presence of up to 100 people. And these activists wasted no time in organizing a previously postponed protest against Israeli occupation of Palestinian land. The main concern was Israel's decision to annex the Jordan Valley and illegal settlements in the West Bank with the support of the US.
This is a first step against humanity. This is a further step against international law. There is a deep concern about what this means for the future, not only for the Palestinians, but for the Arab world, and in the end for the whole world. Because where are we coming if we are not relying on international law?
Among the protesters were members of the Austrian branch of the Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions campaign, known as the BDS. The group has been sanctioned by the Austrian Parliament, a move that activists say violates the law of freedom of speech. BDS members say they will stay active.
It's the suppression of the Palestinian people, it's the occupation and colonization of Arab lands, and it's the bombardments of Gaza and South Lebanon, and it's all what the Israeli government has been doing for years now. We are protesting against all of it.
Although the European Union has said it will not recognize unilateral Israeli annexation of occupied Palestinian land, protesters say they are disappointed with the inaction of individual European governments and concerned about the close relationship between Austria and Israel.
Activists say they'll continue their protests until their governments pressure the Israeli regime to comply with international law. Homa Lesgi, Press TV, Vienna.
Well, that's it from me now. Thank you very much indeed for staying with us. Good night.